We're here, as we said earlier, in the museum space that we created inside the AOPA headquarters building, partly to respect our 80th anniversary, but also as a way just to going forward, allow people to look at some of the things that AOPA has been responsible for over the years as we move it into our 9th decade of being advocate for general aviation and our freedom to fly. And it was a team effort. A bunch of us in the building worked hard on it. I know Chris Rose, one of our photographers, was particularly helpful in pulling together a bunch of the artifacts that you can see here. Some very interesting things. And our facilities staff was great too in kind of redoing the space to make it have a little bit of a hangar feel to it, and as well as all the things that on display that Chris was responsible for.
Yeah, they really did a nice job. And you know, 80 years is, I think, a really significant anniversary. In fact, so significant that it was even recognized by Congress.
Senate Resolution 203, recognizing the 80th anniversary of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
Senators Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma and Tammy Duckworth of Illinois were the co-sponsors of that resolution. Both of them are pilots. And Inhofe said that AOPA has a strong legacy of being tireless advocates for pilots and contributing to aviation safety. Furthermore, they have played a vital role in educating members of Congress on issues important to the general aviation community. And of course, Senator Inhofe is also the sponsor of the Pilot's Bill of Rights. Inhofe has been a great friend to general aviation through the years.
Yeah, he really has, and really good on a lot of those issues. And really that's what AOPA was founded for. It was a recognition by pilots back in the late 1930s as war was brewing in Europe that aviation wasn't well organized in the United States, and that we needed a strong advocate. And so a group of pilots got together in Philadelphia and kind of scoped out what that might look like and what became ultimately the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
They were a friend of by the name of Noble, who said, and he was associated with the government and the airlines. He said, the airlines are well organized. What's wrong with you guys? Get to work, in effect. And Abby listened carefully, got the four of us together, and that's how May 15th, 1939.
So of course, Paul knew all of the founding members and was very involved early on in the organization, a member of the board for some 40 years and also a chairman emeritus. Now, the Noble that he speaks about is Edward J. Noble, who became chairman of the Civil Aeronautics Board, which was the predecessor to what we know as the FAA today. And Abby, well, that was Abby Wolf. He was one of the founding members, and there were a lot of pilot organizations at the time representing pilots, mostly for fun and recreation, which is great, but there wasn't any voice out there that was really working hard to protect general aviation and to give it a voice in Washington, D.C. The airlines were well organized. They had a lot of influence in D.C., as did the military. Nobody was looking out for what they called at the time miscellaneous aviation. And so it was these 5 founders in Philadelphia that felt like they needed to organize general aviation in a way that gave it a voice, and that's how AOPA came about.
Our 5 founders were Philadelphia businessmen and attorneys, and they got together in the Philadelphia Aviation Country Club on Wings Field and helped organize AOPA. Their mission statement, and it's still a mission statement, is to make flying less expensive, safer, more useful, and more fun. In those early organizing days, they sort of had, it's strange, but one of their biggest problems was coming up with a name. One of the members wanted to call it Pilots Inc. There were some other names floated out. It got to be about 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, and one of the founders just said, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Let's call it what it is, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
And it wasn't just the need for professional representation that drove the formation of the organization. The founders could see the war coming, and they knew that that might threaten flying, private flying, like all of our members did at the time. And so they worked to set up a program called the AOPA Air Guard, which later became the Civil Air Patrol. And then they pushed Congress to establish the Civil Pilot Training Program. And then after Pearl Harbor, rather, all of civil aviation was grounded, but AOPA once again went to work and created the Emergency Pilot Registry, which allowed people who were on that registry to go out and actually continue flying, and they were actually even doing hunting for subs off the coast and doing other useful things for the war effort.
And that was all due to a young guy by the name of Doc Hartranft. Now, Doc come to the attention of the founders because he had formed a flying club at the University of Philadelphia, and he also formed the National Collegiate Aviation Club, which still exists today with a slightly different name. And so they hired Doc to come and run the organization.
Doc Hartranft was a fascinating person. He was a widower with a daughter. Many people never knew he was married. And kind of a patrician guy, not particularly outgoing and not confrontational. But he too was an organizer. The four were attracted to him, five, as the first president, because he'd just come out of Penn, Philadelphia boy, and he'd formed a flying club, and he was good at building the organization, and he was very good at figuring out how to do it socially and otherwise. But I go back to the point, it's not confidential. So he hired this fella, Max Carrant. He was a lovely character. He was one of my favorite people. Speaking of pugnacious, his nose had even been broken in a boxing match. He just matched it physically and in his chat. And he developed something, Warren, called the Confidential Newsletter.
Now, of course, one of those early employees was Max Carrant that Paul talks about. He was the editor at the time of Popular Flying magazine, which later became Flying Magazine. It was owned by Ziff Davis, and AOPA had a deal with Ziff Davis where the AOPA news section was included inside of Popular Aviation or Popular Flying and then later Flying Magazine. So if you were a subscriber to one of those magazines and an AOPA member, you got that special insert, which was, from a publishing standpoint, seems like it was pretty revolutionary at the time.
It was indeed. Now, Max eventually became an AOPA employee.
He did.
And one of the things that Max created was the infamous yellow sheet. Just right down there.
Yes, it is.
It is. And to say that it was controversial?
Yes, it was. Max loved digging up stuff on people and putting it out there.
Well, he was a former investigative journalist, so that was his forte.
Right, it was. In fact, the publication was such a significant part of AOPA that AOPA actually moved its headquarters to Chicago, which is where Ziff Davis was located at the time. And so for a while, the organization was run out of Chicago, where Max was.
It was in the transit building. Although Doc's office, what he shared with film cans and potatoes because of one of our founders' businesses also happened to be there. So,
little known facts.
Well, you know, Tom, Max was a character, but we've had a lot of interesting people and characters through the years as AOPA members. Of course, a lot of famous movie stars, you know, Harrison Ford.
Right, yeah, Harrison Ford. Michael Dorn, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know Michael Dorn as Worf.
Lieutenant Worf.
Right.
Kurt Russell.
Yep.
In fact, Kurt is a very enthusiastic member. He's shown up at some of our conventions through the years.
Yep. Craig Ferguson, the talk show host for a long time. He's an AOPA member.
Right. Some of the astronauts. John Glenn was one.
Yeah, he was. And so was Jim Lovell. And of course, we have the interesting letter we have here from Gordon Cooper.
That's right. On Mercury letterhead from Gordon Cooper, and he says that he's interested in joining the association, and he mentions that he's just purchased a Beechcraft F-35 Bonanza.
Oh, what good choice he has.
He does indeed.